Hi everyone, I'm Natalia. Welcome to my channel. Some of you might be familiar with me from the previous tarot channel YouTube that I had that I ended up deleting. Some of you might be familiar with me through the newsletter interaction. Some of you may not be familiar with me at all, and therefore I welcome you to my channel. Today, I'd like to talk about my personal self-reflections over the course of 4 years, during which there was a 2-year period of binging on tarot decks and purging tarot decks, and then there was about a year period of halting on aspiring tarot and going deeper and self-reflecting. And I want to share with you my psychological insights into my personal self-reflections. I think that this topic is very interesting. I think that I find, at least in tarot YouTube, people constantly talk about this topic. I think we're constantly all talking about this topic, or at least thinking about this topic, because it's relevant for starters, and because also a lot of us tend to engaged in binging behavior or purging behavior of tarot. A lot of us perhaps want to engage in this behavior and can't. And so I think it becomes very interesting thing to introspect in. I also find that it's really important for people to share their own self-reflections and personal discoveries, because by sharing those discoveries, not only do we lend permission for others to vocalize their self-discoveries, but also there might be things that you might find resonant with what I'm about to share, or there might be things that you might not resonate with, but you might start thinking about differently, or there might be things I may say that may take you deeper into asking yourself important questions on the way to self-discovery. What is your relationship to tarot, and what is your relationship to your tarot collection? And I will share some of the questions I have that can help you to achieve that if you're interested to dive deeper. Now, before I share my own self-reflections, I want to say that for starters, I find tarot in of itself very interesting object item, because one, it is a spiritual item. Two, for a lot of people, it is a magical tool to use for magic. Three, it is also a divinatory tool. Four, it is an amazing tool, and this is the way I tend to use it primarily, as a self-projective tool, using psychological jargon as a way to free associate on the images. It's a great psychological tool to dive deeper into yourself, to promote your self-growth, to work on your shadow, to work on your complexes, to work on inner tension. It's a great healing tool. It's a really all-encompassing self-help tool, if you will. And because it has so many functions, including it is an amazing artistic artifact, it is an amazing collector's items. I mean, there's so many functions to tarot. I think for that reason, it is specifically very interesting as an item, because we as individuals are also have multitude of aspects to ourselves. And each one of us not only uses it differently, but each one of us uses it in multitude of ways. I oftentimes use it as self-help, self-psychology type of tool. Sometimes I use it for divinatory reasons. Sometimes I use it for magical reasons. And depending on the reasons I use, I will have a different need and propensity for a particular type of tarot deck. And I think this is also lends to the behaviors that I will be discussing in relationship to myself. So having said that, one of the things that I also want to share is that each one of us is going to be bound to have a completely its own unique, individualistic, person-centric relationship to what tarot means to you. And each one of us is going to, since we're talking about binge and purging behavior in this video, those of you who engage in binging behavior, meaning acquiring many tarot decks over a period of time, or maybe over a short period of time, we'll all engage in the behavior for our own personal reasons. And the reasons are multitude. And oftentimes, the reasons why we engage in this behavior are not very easy to pinpoint. It's not easy, and it's impossible, in fact, even for me as a psychologist, to say, this is why you are acquiring a zillion tarot decks, because I don't know your story. I don't know your relationship to tarot. And most importantly, I don't know the trail of history behind you. The trail of history will very deeply inform your relationship to a pack of cards. This could be a history of scarcity, relationship to scarcity, or relationship to abundance. This could be a history relationship to items, attachment to objects that are very dear and close to you. This could be a history to spirituality. There could be so much behind it that is going to be so specific to you, and out of which your behavior is going to arise. And I will share with you where my behavior arises to help you, if you want to deeper self-reflect, to help you go down the path on self-reflection. The relationship to tarot that we all have that is so person-specific and so individualistic reminds me of when I was in high school. I had a history professor, Professor Griffiths. I still remember his name. He was teaching American history through the face of particular individual figures. And the way he would teach human history or American history, he would tell a story about each individual and why their names are significant in American history. And I remember this one story, and I'm extrapolating a lot out of my memory. So it may not be fully accurate, but the gist of the story stands true to what I'm trying to say about tarot. He told us about Elizabeth Arden. Most of us know Elizabeth Arden. Elizabeth Arden is a woman behind Elizabeth Arden perfume and makeup and cosmetics empire. And she started off her business during American Depression era. During that time, as the story that I remember, recall this professor telling me, during that time, Elizabeth Arden started selling perfume during the Depression era. Now, it was challenging because it was Depression era. Funds were scarce. A lot of people were financially struggling to make money to even put the food on the table. A lot of people were even financially struggling to get a job to provide for their family. And she became popular during Depression era specifically because of her perfume. Now, we may think, what would make a woman buy a perfume and spend extra funds on perfume, which you would think is not necessary when you're struggling to put food on the table? But the reasoning goes that women during Depression era wanted something to represent symbolically a hope, symbolically represent that times will get better, symbolically to remember who they are as individual human beings. This is like a bottle of perfume. Now, a bottle of perfume at the time to a woman could have meant so many things. And it could have been easier to judge why somebody would acquire an expensive bottle of perfume when she needs to put food on the table. But to that woman, that could have been psychologically what she needed to keep herself going. That could have been a reminder. Every morning when she put on that perfume, it could have been a reminder that times will get better, that I will persevere. It maybe have given her a bigger push than anything else during the time period. Tarot is the same thing. It is an object that we all have a personal relationship with it. For some people, this is an object that is very dear to their hearts because for the first time in their life, they could own a spiritual object and feel empowered that they're owning something that is close to their spirituality. For some people, this could mean that they're finally vocalizing themselves. For other individuals, perhaps during the times when times are very scarce for them, acquiring an object that is of value could represent to them that they value themselves. There could be so many things that the subject represents to us, and to each one of us, it could be a multitude of things. To somebody else, this could be a trusted friend. This could be the only item in their environment that is always there for them, that always gives them guidance, and that is never abandons them and is very loyal to them. So what I'm trying to say is that when we look at other people's behaviors out there in the world in terms of tarot acquisition, tarot collecting, tarot binging, whatever you name it, we really don't know what their relationship, again, there's this trail of history behind them that situates them within their own context and within their own relationship to tarot. Now, for me personally, I have used tarot since I was 16 years old. That's when I got my first pack of cards. But it wasn't until I think it's 4 years ago. I have to look up when I first made my YouTube video. It wasn't until about 4 years ago that I discovered tarot YouTube. And when I discovered tarot YouTube, just like so many of you who are watching, I discovered that there is such thing as indie decks. I never knew indie decks existed. I never knew there could be decks produced by independent artists. I never knew there could be decks on different themes. I never knew there could be decks of different texture and feel. And when I discovered it, that's when my binge period started. I still remember to this day, the very first indie deck I bought back then was Tabula Mundi Tarot. And I remember distinctly when it arrived and me opening the package in the bedroom next to my husband and pulling it out. And it was so beautifully wrapped. It was a whole sensory experience. When I opened it up and seeing the cards, which by the way, Tabula Mundi is a gorgeous, gorgeous tarot deck, seeing the deck and seeing that it's possible to create tarot deck with such beauty and such attention just completely blew me away. When I reflect back on this binge period, and trust me, my binge period lasted 2 years. And during 2 years of my binge period, oh my God, I don't even want to name how many cards. I have collected so many tarot decks. I have purchased so many tarot decks. Again, everything is situated within our personal context, right? For me, I'm very privileged that I can afford to splurge on tarot decks. That privilege allows me to also impulsively engage in a binging behavior. So there's a lot of goes into why we engage in a particular behavior that we engage in. And during the binge time period, now that I self-reflect, part of the binge, there's two reasons why I kept binging. One of the reasons why I kept binging, and perhaps this is why if you ever binged, this could be one of them for you. One of the reasons why I kept binging on tarot is because there was greed. I was greedy. I was completely greedy. There was this greed, unconscious greed coming through. It was this insatiable appetite. It is as if I was eating chocolate bar all of my life, and now somebody walked me into the chocolate store, and there's all these different types of chocolate: white chocolate, milk chocolate, dark chocolate, chocolate with raspberries, chocolate with dark cherries, you name it. That I just, through my insatiable appetite, my eyes were more hungrier than my stomach. And I started greedily acquiring tarot decks, not only because I could, but because I didn't want to miss out. I didn't want to miss out sampling every single chocolate. It's almost as if I needed to do that in order to convince myself that the chocolate I have is actually my favorite chocolate. So there was this part of insatiable appetite that manifested as a greedy behavior, greedy acquisition behavior for me at least, with tarot decks. And not to negate the fact that the tarot decks that I got, I truly did appreciate the art that they had. I truly appreciate the artist. And when I felt like the deck was not for me down the road, my purging period, I would either gift it away to somebody who could actually use it, or I would sell it for a lesser price than what I acquired it for, so that people can actually have it who want to have it. So that greedy behavior, the insatiable appetite of the behavior, lasted for a long time. And I honestly don't even know, maybe 300 tarot decks over time. I, just completely insane. I mean, for me, it was a lot. And it lasted for a period of time. I would beach, and part of the beaching was also the fear of missing out. When the deck would come out, there was this fear that this indie deck, I'm going to miss out on limited edition. And that was also definitely part of it. I know that for some people, it's part of the hunting for vintage deck or hunting for something that is out of print. Everybody, like I said, we're all going to have widely different associations to our behavior. And this is why reflecting back and sharing is so important, because it starts to paint this behavior in multitude of colors versus just black and white, versus just, oh, this is a tarot addiction if you have gazillion decks, or oh, this is this or that. And for some people, who knows, maybe for you it is a tarot addiction. But the more we share our stories, the more we color the behavior with nuances, because their nuances are as multitude as there are of all of us in terms of our individuality. So the first part of binging was insatiable appetite / greed. The second part, the reason why I also binge decks, is because I was hoping that I will find the right deck, either the right deck for me, that's going to be the only deck, or the right deck for career exploration, the right deck for healing, the right deck for shadow work, the right deck for you name it. And every time I would see a tarot flips or a tarot review, I would look at the deck and I could just feel myself projecting the rightness of the deck into the deck. Every card I would look at, I would feel that, yes, I can totally see how this deck would be perfect for inner exploration. Oh my God, this is a perfect deck for the healing work. I can totally see how I can work with this deck. Or I would tell myself things that I would want to see in this deck. The death card in this deck is the best card I have ever seen illustrated. This is the deck for me because death card is my favorite card in tarot. This is what our mind does. My mind for sure is a monkey brain. My mind for sure will come up with reasons and justifications, and it will lie to itself in order to acquire something. Then, of course, I get it, the hype is over and the time cools down, and I realize that this is a deck. It's a great deck, but it's definitely not the deck. So I had to go through a reflection period to realize that there was this insatiable appetite, and I had to stop myself. And also that there's no such thing as the deck. There is just a deck that I most likely use, which is, for me, it's a Zos deck. It's a deck that I most often reach to. It's a deck that I'm most familiar with. It's a deck that I can read probably blindfolded. But is it the deck? No. Why is it not the deck? Because I have other decks and I enjoy using other decks for a variety of reasons, but this is definitely a deck. If there was a fire in my house right now and people said, just pick one deck, you can only take one deck out of the fire, I will definitely take this deck. So for me, this is a deck. And I know that a lot of people also in the beginning search for the deck because there's so many options. There's so many beautiful artistic renditions of tarot that it lets you to start thinking, it landed me to start believing that there is one particular deck for me. This is what led to my binge behavior as I reflect back on it. Now, during the 2-year of binge period, there was also, within that year as well, a purging period. Now, purging is also interesting too, right? This is a time period when I myself for sure, get rid of the decks, where I either sell them or I give them away. In other words, I just get them out of my environment. I move them on. And the purging period told me as much about my behavior as the binging did. For me, my purging behavior, first and foremost, and perhaps this could be for you, maybe not, but for me, first and foremost, it's just the fact that I had a need to purge myself, get rid myself of all of these decks. Just the fact that I had that feeling in of itself told me that there's a tension inside of me, that there's a conflict within me in regards to having so many tarot decks. Otherwise, why have such a strong, and I had a very strong, almost visceral reaction to get rid of it's almost as if my arms were itchy to get rid of the tarot decks. Sometimes I will just box them up and send them to somebody. And I'm not an anxious person, but having so many decks around me, lying around, made me very anxious, made me uncomfortable, because I realized by self-reflection, this is where self-reflection comes in, that for me personally, having decks that I don't often use, and I had a lot of decks that would just lie year after year without use. Having decks that I never reach to at least once within a year drove me nuts, because I don't like to have things around me that I'm not using, that are just lying around. This is just me. I had to realize through self-reflection that for me personally, my personality type, my character, who I am as a personality, doesn't like to have a lot of things around me that I don't use. For that reason, I had a tension and an inner conflict when I would have so many decks around me and I was not using them. It drove me nuts and I had to purge. So the purge behavior was telling me that, hey, I see you binging all the tarot decks, but in reality, that's not in in a alignment with your personality. That's really not what makes you comfortable. Yeah, I understand you want to have all the stereotypes because they're all wonderful and you don't want to miss out. But the reality is, when you have all of the stereotypes, it drives you nuts and you realize that it's not for you. So why don't we just stop doing this, stop doing something that you're not, and focus on how you can start bringing stereotypes or start perhaps curing back the terror that you have by actually looking at the purpose and whether it's usable to you or not. This was my process. This was my process of self-reflecting. That's what the purging told me. I know that sometimes for some people, it can be when somebody makes a video about consumerism or a lot of terror decks, it can bring up emotions or feelings or discomfort. For some, it may not. For me, it wasn't somebody else's videos that brought things within me. It was my environment. It was my surroundings. It was my bookshelf covered with tarot decks, the decks behind tarot decks that I couldn't even see. I even forgotten which tarot decks I had that was driving me personally nuts. It did not work well with the way I'm psychologically organized as a person. And you have to ask yourself what works for you as a person. You have to take into consideration your personality too, and what works for you as an individual. Because you know what? This is having thousands of tarot decks. It's just like anything else. People have thousands pair of shoes. People have thousands lipsticks. People have thousands, you name it, right? Everybody has different relationships with things. I have thousands of books, and I can be okay with that, and it doesn't make me anxious. But when it comes to tarot decks, it's a little bit different. And I think for me, because I see this as primarily a tool to be used. Books are books I read, and I keep them in order if I ever want to reference them. But they're not unread books sitting around driving me nuts. But this is because I don't use it. It tends to drive me nuts. And this is where, again, self-reflection comes in. And this is where it's really, really important. So what was interesting is I had a period of binge and purge for 2 years. That was the period when I self-reflected and when I realized that, okay, you need to stop binging. You're binging for all the wrong reasons. And you also need to stop purging and acquiring things, because obviously the minute you have too many, you get rid of it and it's just too much for you. So I went through about a year period of, I guess, kind of not really acquiring. Maybe I would get a deck every 3 months or so, or not at all, just using the decks that I had, focusing on what I had. And that period of not really getting things in allowed me a pause. It allowed me to decompress. What helped tremendously also is being off social media, where I didn't have to see a lot of decks, so that my impulsivity gets tempted. Remember, everything is relative. For some people, they get tempted to buy tarot deck, but they financially can't afford it, and that holds them back. For some people, they can financially afford it, and that impulsivity is not a big thing for them. So it's all contextual within really where you situate it as an individual. For me, when I started to self-reflect, I started asking myself, what is the primary function of the tarot for me personally? Since I use tarot primarily for self-development, I started asking myself, what requirements do I have for a pack of cards in order to help me on the way toward my self-development? Some of the requirements I have are for the images to be something that I'm drawn to, for the images to be something that takes me deep into myself, for the images are something that appeal to me, where I can sit down for a long period of time and look at them. Some of the other requirements that I personally discovered for myself is that there has to be enough esoteric symbolism for me, because in the end, it is still partially a divinatory tool for me. And that was really, really important. Symbols on the images have to make sense to me. If I'm looking at the, you name it, if I'm looking at like Empress card and their images there that are not congruent with the way I'm used to seeing Empress, then it becomes challenging for me to work with it as a tool. Over the period of time, what I got into is I've got into a set of rules for myself. Some of the set of rules that I have for myself are, if I see something and I really want it, I give myself 24 hours. Now, I know 24 hours might not be a long period of time for you. 24 hours is plenty for me. In fact, one night of sleep is perfect amount for me to wake up and to realize whether that was an impulsive desire or whether it was actually something that I want and need. So I give myself 24 hours before just impulsively engaging in transaction. Another thing that I do is I ask myself when I see a tarot deck, what will this offer me that the ones that I have right now do not offer me? And this helps me a lot. For example, one that I recently acquired is the magical botanical oracle, because I read a lot on baneful plants. I have a lot of books on baneful plants. I also have, interestingly, I forgot, and I have some oils made from baneful, like from wolfbane, and from other baneful plants. And so when I saw Racine talk about the tarot deck, I thought this was really interesting because I know already so much about this plant. So this was usable to me because it already was imbibed with knowledge. This is how I discern whether to make a purchase or not. Now, all of us are different, and all of us are going to discern differently. For somebody, the discernment is going to come from price point. Is it something that you can afford? And if you can't afford it, can you splurge on it? And if by splurging on it, will this in any way affect your livelihood, affect your sense of security and safety? Everybody's going to, some people are tarot readers and they feel like having a particular theme tarot deck is going to help them when they read for other people. Some people are collectors. They genuinely collect tarot as an images, pack of cards, as art form. And for them, a new tarot deck with different imagery lends something new to their collection. Everybody's going to have their own personal reasons why they're doing what they're doing, why they're engaging in behavior, why they are binging or purging or acquiring a lot or little of tarot decks, why somebody only uses one tarot deck will have their own explanation versus why somebody uses 20 tarot decks. Again, it's going to be individualistic, and it's impossible to judge behavior unless you actually ask a person why they do what they do. That's the best way to find out. Now, I know that for me personally, as a psychologist, was the best way for me to find out if I have a tension with the behavior. And I know that some people, they're starting to ask themselves on YouTube whether, to what extent it's a little too much for them. Is it consumerism issue? Is it addiction issue? I don't like the word addiction. It's a little too clinical. Perhaps maybe, I don't know, attachment, I don't know. But I think it's good that we're asking ourselves these questions. I was asking these questions myself when I was purging. I was looking back and thinking, what the hell is going on? I spent all this money on tarot decks and now I'm getting rid of them. And a lot of tarot decks I just gave away. And so I was sitting with myself and asking, what's the point of this behavior? So I think it's important and good to ask yourself all of these questions. Sometimes, for me personally, the best way to find out that there's a conflict between behavior and myself is when I get triggered. I know that triggering is something that is also misunderstood. People often think that triggers are, sometimes people erroneously say that every time you have a feeling about something, or every time you have a thought or opposition about something, or somebody's sharing something, you're being triggered. And that is not true. Triggers are when we hear something or we see something and it triggers, it pulls, yanks on the deep unconscious aspects of ourselves that are already in conflict that we're not aware of. And because it yanks at us, there's always emotional voltage to it. There's always feeling voltage to it. Feelings such as defensiveness, righteousness, judgment, jealousy. I'm trying to think of other ones, but it's anger, for example, hatred. When it brings up these feelings, and especially when we see something or hear something and we feel like we need to defend our position, that defensiveness is the very first sign that something got triggered, that something needs to work on. Now, there's a lot of things that are not triggers. And you can often see, for example, YouTube of any kind, tarot YouTube, my other YouTube where I talk about psychological stuff, is a prime example. Comment section, just reading people responses in comment section is an excellent example to spot triggers and to spot things that are not triggers at all, but a critical engagement in a dialogue. You can always spot them because triggers will be missing an arm length. The distance is going to be gone. People who respond because they got triggered, they don't respond to begin with, they react. And the reactions are always imbibed in emotions. There's emotional voltage to it. It sounds defensive. It sounds like you're trying to prove a point, like you're trying to prove why whatever somebody said or did is wrong, why you think it's right. There's power over dynamic. A thoughtful engagement without being triggered is somebody that you can see that there is an arm length, that you can see that there's no emotions. You can see that somebody says, hey, I hear what you're saying. At the same time, here's where I disagree. And laying out the disagreements in a constructive way. And you can see that the defensiveness is not present. And that's how you know that that's not a trigger. You know that you're not getting triggered when you hear somebody say something or do something that you don't disagree with, but you're also calm. You don't feel like you need to engage in an all emotional attack. You're not boiling, your temperature didn't go up. You're calmly hearing it and you go, okay, that's point of view. I think differently. And then you're able to vocalize it. That's when you're not being triggered. Being triggered is your blood boils, the degree goes up. So triggers are incredible ingredient. It's such an essential ingredient for shadow work. It's an incredible ingredient to figure out what kind of conflicts we have. For me, again, the trigger was the purging behavior. Well, actually, before the purging behavior, for me, the trigger was seeing all the decks around me and being irritated, being anxious about it, wanting to get rid of them. I knew that something was triggering me. I knew that my environment was affecting me and was yanking on something that was unresolved. And that was a doorway for me to self-reflect. For you, it could be your environment. Pay attention to your environment. For you, it could be if somebody made the video, maybe something about this video makes you feel very defensive, makes you feel like your blood boils. That also means it's a trigger token. That's how triggers tend to operate. But no, not everything is a trigger. But you have to pay attention to the emotional voltage attached to it. One of the best ways, if you're sitting there, if you're wondering, hey, I wonder what is my relationship to my tarot collection? Is my relationship healthy? Is it unhealthy? Is there something I'm not paying attention to? Are there blind spots? Which, by the way, we all have. Sit down and ask yourself, how do I feel about the tarot that I have around me? How do I really feel about it? What are my feelings about spending money on tarot? How do I feel about spending money on tarot? What are my feelings when I hear somebody else talk about tarot consumerism or tarot addiction or tarot beach? What comes up for me? You may find out that nothing comes up for you. You may find out that it seems like I'm just paying attention to this content that is being made out there on tarot YouTube, but nothing comes up and I feel fine about where I'm at. You may find out that for you, like myself, having too many tarot decks drives you nuts. You may find out that having a lot of decks is actually your jam. It's something that lends you to utilize it as a tool. You may find out that perhaps you're struggling because you're spending more money than you should when you should be spending money elsewhere. You may find out that even though you have access to abundance, even though you have access to privilege to buy a lot of decks, you're really wasting your money because you're acquiring something that you may not need. You may find out so many things about yourself, but the whole premise is to be able to dive deeper into yourself and to ask yourself all of these questions. Behavior is very challenging. Behavior is very multifaceted. Again, it's very easy to point the finger and to judge, and I made many mistakes of judging other people. And I always have to remind myself to step back and to remind myself that I don't know what their relationship is to that object. I'm imagining those women during Depression era. I'm imagining two women living next to each other, and one comes home and saying, I just bought myself red doe perfume. And another one saying, are you fucking nuts? Are you crazy? Don't you know we're in the middle of depression? What are you doing spending money? And I'm imagining that other woman explaining to the woman that to her, that perfume means a world, because it's not only hope, it's possibility. The bottle in of itself encompasses such a huge promise for her. For somebody else, it might not, but we don't know until we ask. We tend to be, as human beings, we all have a fallacy of seeing the world through our lens and believing that the way we see the world is exactly the way the world ought to be. Oh my God, I forgot. There's a psychological term for it. It's like naive realism or something like that. I think it's naive realism. But it's a fascinating phenomenon that we all experience and we all go through and we all fall fallacy to. And the reality is that our relationship to why we have what we have, why we collect what we have, why we have a lot of them, why we struggle with the behavior, why we don't struggle with the behavior, again, has a trail of history and a context behind it that is situated within yourself and situated within your particular time frame and your particular experiences. So that's what I wanted to share. I think I went off on like a very long, winding road in terms of sharing this, but I think it's a very interesting subject. And I don't know about you. I hope that the viewers on my channel are viewers primarily who use tarot for self-discovery, for self-growth, for deeper dive in, because that's how I use it. And every time I make content, I make it with that aim in mind. So for that reason, I think it's an important topic to talk about, because it is something that is in our sphere of influence. It is something that is in our environment, and it's something to ponder if we want to understand ourselves more. Remember, our consciousness is only 10% of who we are. 90% still remains deeply unconscious. So just think about so many things about yourself, about myself, that I also don't know. And for that reason, this is why this is such a great tool, because it allows us to take a deep dive into ourselves. So comment below. I'd love to engage in a dialogue and a discussion. Let me know, what is your relationship has been to, if you were binging tarot, what has been your relationship to binging tarot? If you purged, what did you discover for yourself? Have you done self-reflections? Maybe you don't care about doing self-reflection because you totally feel fine about binging and purging or any other tarot behavior you have. Again, all valid. What does, especially I would be curious to know, what does this mean to you? I know that for me, this is a spiritual object. It is a self-help tool. But I also, honestly, I can say with full honesty is that if I were to lose attachment to all tarot, it won't be the end of the world to me. But that's me. For somebody else, this is much more meaningful item that means a world to them. Again, we're all so different, and that's a good thing, is that everybody, by sharing their relationship to it can again lend color and narrative to the nuances of what tarot is and what tarot means to all of us. So comment below. I love reading all of your comments, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye.